All right, perfect. We are now live. Glad to have you guys here. We've got, for our latest webinar, we've got LeadSimple, obviously some of my favorite people since I do so much work with LeadSimple. Obviously, for those who know, we've been doing LeadSimple build outs and stuff for people now for a couple years. So very, very happy to have you guys on. We've got both Jordan, the CEO of LeadSimple, and of course, we've got Julian. So I will have both of you do a quick introduction to yourself. Jordan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, Jordan Muela, CEO of LeadSimple here, and big PM Assist fan too. Excited to be on the webinar.
Excellent, excellent. Julian, over to you. Oh, I think you're muted, Julian.
Only happens live.
Yes, of course. We pre-did this, everybody. We were just on 15 minutes ago and everything was working fine, and now it stops, of course.
No.
Julian? All right, we'll give you a second to work on that, and hopefully you can get that corrected, and we'll get going. Let's start off, Jordan. I would imagine that most of our audience is pretty familiar with LeadSimple. If they're getting our emails and everything, they've definitely heard of you. But we probably have a few people on who have never been in the platform, never used it. Maybe you could kind of give everybody a quick rundown of how you started LeadSimple and how you kind of got here and why LeadSimple is here and why this was the product you decided to bring to market.
Before LeadSimple, I was running a company that was doing lead generation, connecting owners with property managers. Did that for a couple of years. Realized that the biggest challenge in that business was follow-up and the speed of follow-up, and that following up quickly had a disproportionate impact on conversion of owner leads. In order to actually make that happen for our clients, we first built LeadSimple only as an application that would automatically call you and say, hey, you have a new lead, connect them by pressing 1. That then grew into a CRM, which then grew into a workflow automation machine, which is then further expanded into communications. And our goal and focus is really on just making sure that the entire life cycle is as automated, clean, and seamless as possible. So that's what's left is high quality, thoughtful interactions.
Oh, hold on. We seem to be having a technical difficulty. Give me just a second here.
Is my audio coming through right now?
Yes.
Yeah, now we have it. Let me make sure everybody else is hearing things. Okay, so other people are saying, okay, it's working. We're good. Okay, sorry about that. keep going. Were you?
I'm done.
Sorry, I was dealing with our technical glitch here, so apologies. Julian, now we've got you back. Did you want to introduce yourself now that we can hear you?
Yes, sure thing. So I'm Julian. I'm here at LeadSimple. I'm part of the sales team. Just happy to be here and excited to dive into all things lead and tracking and managing.
Excellent. Yeah, for those who don't know Julian, he's referred us a lot of business here at PM Assist. So obviously we are very appreciative of that, and we've done the same, the other direction. We've sent a lot of stuff over to LeadSimple because I am, a big believer in LeadSimple. So I mean, as everybody knows, we only partner with a few companies at PM Assist, and the only companies we partner with are companies that I actually use and my property management business. So we've just got, I believe, 12 industry partners that we have with PM Assist, and they're all the ones that we actually work with on a day-to-day basis. So I'm a real believer here in the product. And the first thing I'd like to talk about, and this can go to either Jordan or Julian. One of the very first things when I started listening to podcasts in the industry, Jordan had an early podcast called the Profitable Property Management Podcast that he still has going now. And I remember still back listening to him, and you might have been talking with Jeremy Pound, or I can't remember who you were talking with back in the day, but you were talking about how nobody answers their phone and nobody follows up. And that's the reason that nobody converts leads. Everybody is always talking about, of course, there's the famous scene from Glengarry Glen Ross, the leads suck. And, the answer is usually, well, no, the leads actually aren't that bad. You just aren't calling them back, or you never called them in the first place. What have you seen on this? And either of you can field this, when you talk to property managers, when they're not getting the conversions that they want, how often are you seeing that the real problem is that they're not utilizing a tool like LeadSimple just to make sure that they are, number one, calling the person back, but then also doing the follow-up?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of surreal to me to have been in the industry long enough that I started there, and that was a big conversation when I started. And in many ways, I feel like that conversation or point of perspective has kind of faded over time. And I probably contributed to that, because when we went from a CRM to operations, we veered, at least in what we were talking about, focusing on having conversation around from sales to ops. But absolutely nothing has changed. Speed to lead is as important as it was. It's disproportionately important when the sales cycle is shorter or the transaction value is lower, i.e., if you're talking about $1 million B2B deal with 5 major stakeholders that on average closes in 6 months, speed to lead is not as big of a deal. But when immediacy is there, and the average sales cycle in PM is something like 21 days, there's a strong bias towards immediacy, in large part because when the consumer is contacting folks, they don't have well set criteria. Their criteria are not mature and robust such that on the basis of a numeric scorecard, it's very clear to them, stack ranking, who they're talking, who they should buy from. So what do? We fall back to other proxies. And one of them is, how quickly do you pick up the phone? And if you call me back quickly now, it's more likely that when I'm a customer later, the same thing is going to happen. So it's both, who did I first get in conversation with, get reps with, go start going down the path with, and the proxy of what it says about responsiveness. And we know that responsiveness is a huge deal on the operations side. So this is as important as it ever was. If you want numerics, if you want data around this, I'd strongly suggest getting a copy of the book We Secret Shopped You by Mike and Dylan at Geek Leads. But the data is very clear and depressingly clear. I think that's the thing I would highlight. For a lot of folks, it's kind of like this downer, but the data is so clear. If you call people back in 60 seconds, your lead conversion will be higher. What does that mean for you? Does that mean that you are now going to start calling people back in 60 seconds? I don't know, maybe, but certainly organizationally, it's something you can think about. If it's not you, it's somebody else in the office, or it's a series of people. And LeadSimple has a notification system in place so that every time somebody fills out that contact us form on your website, we can send out a series of calls to you, your staff, in a round robin or whatever order you would like. You just pick up the phone and then it auto dials that prospect, and it makes a big difference.
What have you seen as far as, as the automation component of this? So, like on our sales pipeline in our LeadSimple account, we basically have it set up where we're sending out an immediate text message. So when a lead comes in, the lead is getting a text message from us immediately. Even if we can't pick up the phone and call them, they're getting a message from us with a quick hello. My name is, for us, our main BDM is Zach. I'm going to be in touch with you shortly. How much do you think that really factors into the perception of prospects out there that you're quick to follow up?
I think it does matter. There's 2 questions there. One is perception. When a text or an email, when an automated email goes out, everybody knows you didn't send that. When a text goes out, a little more probable you sent it. If it's a call, you're definitely the one calling. So I think text is somewhere in the middle, but texts have much higher response rates, and there is a preference towards text. Society-wide, we've shifted away from phone, more towards text. So I think that's a very worthwhile sort of thing. Where I see people delude themselves, particularly with automated email responders, is saying like, well, I followed up. An automated email responder is not follow-up in my mind. Text works, but it should feel casual and conversational, which means if somebody gets it and respond and you don't respond, it starts to break the frame.
Gotcha. And there's this question that Abby dropped in to the chat, which I think is really good here, talking about the number of touches that it takes for a lead. And she says she thinks the average lead takes about 9+ to close. Obviously that number kind of varies, but this is, when I work with consulting clients, this is one of the biggest problems I see. People get the lead in and they respond, and maybe it's not immediate. Maybe they call in 15 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. They'll do the initial reach out, but then it all seems to fall apart. If they're not in a system like LeadSimple or something yet, and that's usually something that we work with clients on, several months in, because we usually got to clean up some other stuff first. But, if they're just doing everything on a spreadsheet, it basically dies at that point. And, that's, how important is this follow-up and having this pipeline built out in your system to be able to get these leads closed? What do you, because you got tons of data on this, obviously, at this point, from what you see on conversions. How important is that?
Yeah, it's super important. I would break this down into two distinct buckets. We have the active sales process, and then we have a nurturing sequence. If they're an active buyer, if they are actively in a serious conversation about wanting to sign up as a customer, that's one set of considerations. If you had a conversation with them 3 months ago, it didn't go anywhere, they said, I need to talk to so-and-so, it's going to be a couple months, that's a separate consideration, and both merit thoughtful follow-up, but they look differently in what the approach is. The nurturing is more education and consistency, and the active sales follow-up is more lower in the funnel, where you're assuming buying intent and you're talking about the specifics of making a decision now in the near term. But yeah, to answer your question, it's massively important, and it's something you want to build structure around. The structure that you use is the precursor to the structure that you add and provide to somebody in the sales process, your first BDM. And if you have a BDM that's not good with follow-up, they're not good at their job. I mean, that's a one-to-one relationship.
Amen. You mentioned the ability to pull data out of this and to actually be able to look at real numbers and be able to see how this is all working. You mentioned that earlier, and I real quick, I wanted to show everybody what this kind of looks like in LeadSimple. And one of the reasons I want to show this to people is that I bet at least half of the people who use LeadSimple have never once gone to the sales forecast report. And this, in my opinion, is one of the most important, most useful things on the pipeline side, the non-op side of LeadSimple. And if you're a rent scale client, you've probably gotten into this, it's there, or if you work with PM path builders, but most people aren't aware of this. So I wanted to kind of show this to people. Let me do a quick screen share. Let me select this here, sales forecast. Okay, is everybody able to see this screen? Thumbs up. Perfect. So this is our actual sales data for this month. So I'm kind of throwing actual numbers out there in front of people, but this is what our BDM has done this month. What this screen basically shows is we can see how many deals we've closed, and we're an accidental landlord company, so a deal is basically a door for us for the most part. So you can see we've closed 15 deals, which comes out to 15 doors, and this is the profit we expect to yield from that. And we're able to track this as the month goes on, and we can also do this on a quarterly basis or a yearly basis. So if you look at the quarter, we're one door down from where we want to be. So hopefully we get that door closed here in this quarter to get us back where we want to be. And then you can see the year also, but the system is using data that you put in here back in the assumptions. So you can throw all this in here as to what your conversion rates are. So like we can see if we send out a management agreement, we're basically going to convert, 28% of those management agreements we send out. And then you can set your goals here for by quarter, how many properties you want to convert. And the system will run all these numbers for you. It'll actually say, all right, we know how many leads you need in order to get to your goal. And this is how close you are to that, or how many more leads you need to get. You can see that our BDM, if I show you this, let me get back to this month, we are actually 66 leads below where we would normally want to be at this point in the month, but he's way above goal. So he did a fantastic job for the month. But this lets you kind of keep up with this and easily manage a salesperson, because if you're me, and Jordan knows this, and Julian really knows this about me too, I'm an ops guy. I am not a sales guy. Jordan loves sales. I can't stand sales. This is not who I am. So, for, someone like me, and there's a lot of property management company owners out there who are operational type people. It's me, Peter Lohman, it's that engineer mindset. If you want to manage a salesperson or a sales team, then you really need this kind of tool. This is there's my lovely wife throwing her comments up on the screen. That's fantastic. But this, if you don't know where this is in LeadSimple and you're a LeadSimple user, go and find it, start using it. This is amazing. This makes your life so much easier. I don't know if you want to throw anything else in there, either Julian or Jordan, if you got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'd like to mention that not only is this making it really easy for you to manage a sales team, but it's also making it easy for your sales team to say, well, it's great that I have a great pipeline right now, but I don't have enough leads to cover next month and then the month after. So you're always just chasing that next deal. And it's just too consistent. Discipline will always beat charisma. So it's having a focused, structured process that you're following, the consistencies, because we just see that leads don't really die. It's just that somebody else picks them up.
Amen. That's so true.
It's really about that. It's like, who's following up with them, who's calling them. If they raise their hand, did you get to them? It's just a little bit of empathy, and they're needing your help. Well, are you making yourself available? So just wanted to throw that out there. Yeah.
Excellent. So this, this is obviously, very early on in the sales process. This is what we're dealing with, and because we're talking here from, the whole way through. We want to talk about how we can manage all of this, both from a sales perspective through an ops perspective. So kind of walk me through, Julian, how does this all tie together? Let's say you've got your sales pipeline built out in LeadSimple, you're managing all that, and then you get a management agreement signed. In the old days, LeadSimple kind of stopped there. That's what the original CRM was. It was a CRM. We were trying to get people through the sales funnel, get them signed up on a contract. And then, people like me in the old days were using something like Process Street or something to kind of manage everything after that. But now it all really kind of ties together. So can you talk a little bit about how LeadSimple has grown beyond that and really moved into taking the lead from that conversion stage on into the actual property management, onboarding, getting the property leased, all that stuff on the ops side? Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, you said it great in the beginning. It's all about, like, how are you going to set the tone for the whole relationship that you're going to have with that person? And it starts at the lead stage. They're a prospect, but then how does that lead to cash automatically turn into a relationship builder? So it's not only did I get that contract signed, did I ask you for all the documentation I needed? Do I have the proof of ownership? Do I have everything? Am I calling you 3 months out and still asking for something that I should have had 2 months ago or whatever? It's all about, like, being really focused on, this is how we're presenting the person. Where does the deal actually end? It doesn't end when they sign a contract. It ends when you onboarded the property, right? So how does that transition from operations continue being a sales cycle for the owner? Because maybe somebody's sales cycle ended once they signed that contract. The owner hasn't had a deal until they see their property listed. They see that somebody's calling. That's really where the deal ends for the owner, right? So that's the way we like to see things.
That's a fantastic point, because this is actually where I see people drop the ball probably more than anything, except if maybe you get onto some other processes like lease renewals or those sorts of things. There's common, problems there that I see with PM companies, but the biggest place where I see people drop the ball is during that onboarding stage. You got your BDM, they close the deal, and then things can stagnate pretty easily. And if they're not using a good process, then if it takes you a week to get back to that person and get them actually onboarded, start collecting their information, I've actually seen owners who, if they didn't hear from you in a few days, they'll go out and they'll find somebody new, because they were already probably talking 100%. To 3 or 4 property managers. You're not the only game in town, especially if you're in a market like we are, where there's 300 plus property managers in Atlanta. You got to be on top of that. So this is one of the things I love so much about LeadSimple and the way that it connects to everything is we've got it set up where when we send out a management agreement, it goes out automatically from PandaDoc. We just use a Zap for that. And when that contract signs, it automatically is generating our onboarding process and reaching out to that owner immediately. So when the contract gets signed, we're talking like 2 minutes before that owner is getting an email from us that says, hey, here's your onboarding form. Here's your owner handbook. Here's all this stuff. We're going to reach out to you. There's going to be a video or a phone call that we're going to do. all that kind of stuff later. But we're just going to go ahead and get this process started. So, how important do you see that kind of stuff, when someone's doing the onboarding stage? Do you find that that's helpful to prevent any sort of loss of these leads once they're actually signing their contract, and really be following up that quickly and collecting that information? What have you seen with all the property managers you've worked with, Julian?
What I've seen, it's just, you have to have a lot of clarity on what your process is, how disciplined your team is. Well, that's all very great, and it's nice to have a good philosophy around that. But if you don't have tech that's helping you with things such as making sure it's getting routed to the right person, because if an owner call who's still a prospect, they're still wondering how you're running your business, and they call somebody and they're calling the front desk and it's somebody who's dealing with a ton of chaos, well, they're not going to prioritize them. So having a system that's automatically routing to the right person, making sure it gets to somebody who's going to answer that phone, making sure it's going to be somebody who's going to take care of them, have the time to work with them, and not dealing with a bunch of different chaos and craziness, right? So that's where the tech comes in, because maybe you have a great documented process, but how are you actually triggering it, and how are you following through that process? And having tech to help you with that really becomes essential.
I love that, because we always talk so much about how you got to have a process, of course. And that's one of the first things I tell consulting clients is, before we can really do much here, we need to know what your process is, and you have to have that documented. But like Julian says there, what good is it to have that process if you don't have anything that's making sure that process actually gets done? That's where the tech really comes in. And, I'm the first person to tell you, tech isn't going to solve all your problems, because I see lots of people throw technology at things. Mm-hmm. We've got a problem with maintenance, so we'll sign up with this maintenance software. We got a problem with sales, we'll sign up with the CRM. And they sign up on a bunch of softwares, and now their P&L is loaded with software, like mine is. I'll just admit that I've got tons of tech, but I actually use the tech. So if you're not using it, if you don't have it implemented, then you're not getting anywhere. But you really need to have that second step, because documenting your processes only gets you so far. People make mistakes. People forget to do things. Things slip through the cracks. So, we need to make sure that we've got the tech in place to make sure that doesn't happen. So, fantastic point there. I wanted to kind of show everybody what this looks like in LeadSimple for those who aren't familiar with this. Let me throw up a screen share real quick here. This is what our owner information, or our owner onboarding, actually looks like here. Let me do this. Oops, wrong one. Sorry, guys. Let me see. Let me take that down. Okay. Is everybody now seeing? Nope, that's the wrong one. Sorry. I've got too many tabs open. I'm a tech guy, so I've got a million freaking tabs. Go share screen. Well, for some reason, I cannot get this tab. Here we go. All right. So this is our LeadSimple process for owner onboarding. So if you have never been in LeadSimple, if this is new to you, this might look like you have no idea what's going on, but it's actually pretty simple. So it actually walks you graphically through what this process looks like. Like I said, this process automatically generates as soon as the contract gets signed. Within a couple of minutes, this pops up. These first two steps are conditional. They're kind of fallbacks. They only happen if there's like a glitch. Usually where things start out is right here at this owner welcome email. So the owner gets this email basically instantaneously, and it tells them, hey, these are all the things we're going to need. But then we've got this custom link that goes out to the owner with their onboarding form. So the owner is going to get this, and they're going to click on this link, and where it's going to take them is to a jot form. So let me get that jot form up, and you can take a look at that also, so you can see how easy it is for an owner to do this and how easy it is for you guys to set this up. But
your screen isn't sharing, FYI.
It's going to come back on in a second. The weird thing with I love StreamYard, but the weird thing with StreamYard is it won't let me share the whole browser. It makes me share an individual tab. Mm-hmm. So I got to keep taking it down and up. But this is our owner onboarding form. So we collect all this information automatically. The owner clicks on the link, and it's going to take them here, and they're going to fill out all their contact information, their banking info, tax information, home warranty, all this stuff that you need to collect. But they might have already filled this out before you've even realized they've signed the contract, because this is all automatic. So you don't even have to worry about it. And the big thing is, it still says Process Street here, but this is actually a LeadSimple process ID that's filling out in here. And what we use this for is it's going to push all this information automatically back into LeadSimple as soon as the owner fills out this form and submits it. We've got basically a Zap set up to do that. So all of this is automated. So the owner could literally do this at 11 p.m. You're asleep. The owner signs their contract. They get their email. They fill out their onboarding information. And by the time you get to work tomorrow, you've already got everything you need from this owner to get their contract set up. So, that's the advantage of having the tech. That's what all this really comes down to, and how important this is, and how much it can make your life easier. So, I want people to see that. That's why I wanted to throw it up there. And, I know you've got product demos and everything too, Julian, but I kind of wanted to show people how this looks in a live setting on someone who's actually using it. So, I hope everybody kind of grasps, if you don't have this kind of automation in place, what you're kind of missing out on. The way that you can simplify your life and make this all so much easier if you have this kind of software in place. And I know I've been talking a while. I'll kick it back over to you, Julian. Any thoughts you have there, but don't want to keep droning on. Apologies there.
No, I think it's really helpful to kind of shed light on how basically every handoff in your company is just a risk. It's a risk of something going wrong. It's a risk of something not getting right. It's a risk of losing, just creating friction, right? So
Yep.
You have all this traction, you've got a flow, and then you're handing it off to another department. They have no idea what's going on. They don't have visibility. They can't look through your text. They can't look through your inbox. So having everything in one place. So data, it's not about just you're collecting data. It's you're getting visibility for everyone. So really minimizing and mitigating that risk is where we've just seen people really grow exponentially.
Nice.
And being able to have scalable processes. Yeah.
What do you see? So, we've talked kind of through that owner onboarding process. So we've collected the information from the owner. Obviously, we still got a long way to go at that point to get that property leased. Where do you kind of see, when you're talking with clients that you're bringing on with LeadSimple and they're starting to get used to all this, where do you kind of see the key points, say, from onboarding to the point of getting the property leased, where things tend to fall through the cracks the most, and where you see LeadSimple is able to make the most benefit of preventing those sorts of dropped balls?
So I saw. Okay, so I'll answer it in two parts. I saw there was a comment on when is too much information too much. I think that just being able to follow up is where you're building trust, and in that transition from I have a property, it's vacant, I want it to get, so over communicating. That's just going to avoid. It's going to avoid any surprises, people calling you and saying, hey, I haven't heard from you in weeks. So, hey, look, this is what we've been doing. We've had these amount of showings. So having an automation that's just at least helping you go through that is super helpful. And then the second way that this helps you is getting your team. Does the property need a walkthrough? Do they have any work orders that need to get started? Where is everything, and how is it getting done in a way where you can have full visibility in a dashboard and see where everything is, rather than having to call somebody and just taking their word for it, right?
Nice. You brought up the word team there, and that kind of brings to mind something that I hear from a lot of property managers a lot, which is team buy-in when it comes to any sort of technology, but particularly when it comes to process management software, or a CRM, even for that matter, just getting your BDMs to use the software. What have you guys seen as far as best practices when you're starting to build this stuff out in LeadSimple and trying to make sure that your team is actually going to use it to its full extent and make sure that this stuff isn't happening? Where do you see the big problems here and the solutions to that?
I like that you asked us that question, because you're incredibly qualified to answer this. But from my point of view, what I've seen is getting clear on the why. Why are we doing this? Here's some really bad reasons to do this that I've heard. Getting organized, who doesn't want to get organized? It's a great aspiration. My garage right now, total cluster. Love to clean it up at some point. Is that a compelling motivation for me to take action? No. Revenue, growing revenue, lowering COGS, or really more practically and specifically, a departmental issue. I have somebody that just quit, or I have a department and a function that isn't working well. I have a consistent KPI that's off track and it's impacting my business. There needs to be meaningful pain that you are experiencing, that you've identified, and you're clear on that if I fix this, I will get this outcome, and it's a meaningful impact to the business. If you're just going after automation for the sake of getting organized and because Todd does it, at some point, you're not going to get over the hump, because this is a lot of work. The juice is worth the squeeze, but it is a meaningful squeeze. So that's where it starts, is just getting really clear on what the business case and business value is that necessitates and merits going into this. That's what I have to say about it.
Nice. I like that. I mean, that's more kind of like the high level, early on, what's your motivation here? But let me ask you this. I mean, that works. That's kind of more on the management side of things, the higher level employees. Yeah. What do you think when it comes, because the biggest problem that I hear from people is, okay, I know why I want it. I know the benefits to me and the benefits to the business. How do I convince my leasing agent or my bookkeeper or whoever it is, why do they care about this? What's the reason that they should want to be involved? What do you tell people about that?
Yeah, I mean, time savings is the most clearing, compelling, and consistent thing that lights operational people up. If there was a hierarchy, time saving is probably at the top. Not being yelled at is pretty high. And when we get yelled at, when we get yelled at is when we told someone, hey, this is what's going to happen, and then we do this. Errors, mistakes on things of consequence. And this is an opportunity to prevent that from happening. So error reduction, I think, is appreciated, but it's a little more fuzzy. But time savings is just a very clear thing. You used to have to do this regularly, consistently, and now it's going away. If you're not excited about that, there's probably some other conversations to be had.
Agreed. And, a couple of thoughts, come to mind there. I mean, number one is, I actually give a presentation. I did one recently down for the Jacksonville chapter, where I kind of tie together, how my experience in the airline industry ties into this business, and, checklist philosophy, automation, all that kind of stuff. And, I always talk about, the biggest thing when you're in the airlines is you're trying to make sure that you never make the same mistakes again. Anytime something bad happens, the big goal is let's make sure that problem never rears its ugly head. We've figured out how to solve that problem. Let's make sure it doesn't happen. And that's really what you can do in this industry. If you're using these kind of systems, you can find, okay, we had this big fire that we had to put out. Let's figure out how that fire happened. Where was the gap in our process that caused that situation to develop? And now we can plug that gap. We've got an easy way to add another task to the process, or add some automation, or beef up our instructions so that people know what they're supposed to be doing a little bit better. But it's easy to plug that in and make sure that problem doesn't ever happen again. And when you start to do those sorts of things, what you find as you go along is there's a lot less fires popping up. And as you have a few less fires, that gives you more time to where you can fix even more problems. And it's this snowball where you everything starts to get a little bit easier week by week and month by month. And before you know it, you're able to do like Peter Lohman and take a month off from your business and just disappear, and everything just keeps kind of running. Or, like me a few years ago, I just went on the road and did a road trip for a few months. And, I just kind of check in with the team for a half an hour in the morning. You're able to do those things. But you can only do that if you get all this stuff in place. And that's the same thing for your team, because it's great for you, of course, but it's also great for the team because they can look at it and say, you know what? like Jordan said, I've got less people yelling at me during the day, because things are getting done the right way. I don't have that owner screaming at me and making me feel miserable. Or, I'm able to actually check out at 5 p.m. and not have to be working until 8 to make sure all my stuff gets done because it's so disorganized. So, I mean, there are ways that you can show to your team that this actually does really benefit you also. I'm going to give you one last thing that I recommend on this, because Jordan mentioned the word dashboard a little bit earlier. You can bonus your team on this kind of stuff. And that's what I do for some of the members of our team, where some of their actual incentive compensation is based on what sort of, how are your tasks getting done in LeadSimple? Are they all getting done on time? If they are, you can make a little bit of extra money. I'll pay you extra if your tasks are being done on time all the time. If you're a BDM, it's very easy to add this as a bonus component for you, where you can actually keep track of their activities in the system. But you can do this for anybody. You can actually make this kind of gamify it, where people are actually making a little extra money on their bonus because they're doing what they're supposed to be doing in the system. And that actually, makes it really easy for people to see the benefit to it, even if they don't understand the benefit from less work, less fires, all that. They can even see their paycheck boosted a little bit as a result. So always remember that incentive compensation is another way to kind of drive adoption with your team. It's lots of good stuff in all of that. Appreciate you guys kind of diving into that. Let's kind of move further on in the process to looking at the leasing side of things. So, if we've got the property onboarded, we've got the rent ready process done. Now we need to get somebody actually placed into this property. Julian, where do you see the biggest benefits when you're using something like LeadSimple to do your marketing and your leasing of the property to get to that stage?
So it's all about creating a process that it's very easy to follow, and it's making it so clear exactly where I'm at. Have I posted? Have I listed the property? Do I have any showing software? So we can cater to all different scenarios and pick it up for where one tool leaves off, have a very easy transition to LeadSimple and know exactly where you're at, what you should be doing. And as you're creating all of these steps and all of these sequences, it's all about there's different, point of views. For one person, it could be like, well, now I have a system that's making it very easy for me to remember what I should be doing. And for the management side, well, now I have a system that's making it very hard for somebody to skip a step or to forget to do something or where they're at. So it's all about having that balance of, why do I have this step? Is it a very important step? Should I create a step or an instruction for this? And that makes leasing be very organized, in my opinion. And that's what we see. We see that, okay, it's already been 2 months out in the market. Well, we have a whole record and a whole set of data that we can show the owner, well, this is why we consider that we should lower the rent. But you have a reason for that. These are all the internal tasks we've had. These are all the communications we've had with prospective tenants. These are all the showings we've had. And it's all in one platform and very easy to transfer over and to have visibility on, and not scattered in siloed systems, right?
Nice. Yeah, we got a question here that I want to cover next, but while we're answering this, I want to start getting you ready, Julian. I wanted to, because when we start talking about leasing, this is really where I think the autopilot can be very helpful. And I want people to be aware of the autopilot in LeadSimple for those who aren't aware. So if you want to start getting your demo ready to show people how the autopilot works while we kind of dive into this question. But there was one here that I think is good to cover, because there's actually a lot of workflow templates that LeadSimple has as part of their library and everything. So, Julian, while he's getting ready there, Jordan, maybe you want to talk about, do you have recommended workflows to get people into LeadSimple, or how do you really get people started when you onboard them?
Yes. Well, so two things. Number one, they're assigned with somebody on the team that's actually doing the setup and the hand-holding, working with your team. Like, you are paired with an individual that is walking you through all of this soup to nuts, and also helping you identify who on your team is going to take it the rest of the way. One of the biggest misnomers that we see is that, well, I did my processes, they're done. Now, Todd, I know you're kind of a process nerd and you enjoy it, so you're probably constantly making tweaks, but I'm curious to you, like, what is your recommendation to your clients of the cadence and the frequency with which they should expect to update their processes over time?
Oh, very interesting question. I mean, so the first thing I always recommend to people when they're starting out is I always recommend that you actually work through building your processes in life cycle order. So I always tell people to start out there. So start from the onboarding and work your way through. That's the easiest way to do it when you're building it. But then when it comes to updating it, we actually do quarterly reviews of processes. So we'll actually take a chunk and go through and look at them and see, all right, what's outdated? What do we need to tweak on this? And, I think it's important to have the structure for doing that, where you're obviously it's important to always request feedback, always make sure that if you're running into problems on your processes, people should be passing that up the line to whoever's responsible for maintaining the processes so that they can work on that. But the reality is that I frequently see, and this is even true at my own business, I found this a few days ago where we had a process that still referred to tenant turner, which we're not using anymore. We've been on Rent Engine for a few months, and the process is still referring to our old software, and nobody mentioned it to me. I thought I had gone through and found all the instances of this, but I'd missed one. And, the employee they know how to use the new software. So they just, even though it tells them to go to tenant turner, they're just going to Rent Engine and doing what they need to do because they know how to use it, because they're like, it's fine with me. I know what I'm doing. But from my perspective, I'm thinking of it like, well, yeah, you know what you're doing. But if I onboard another leasing coordinator or another leasing agent, they don't know what they're doing. They need the instructions in the system. So that's why it's really important to have sort of a regimented review of these processes, because stuff will slip through the cracks. If you're not walking through that process on a periodic basis and looking at it to make sure that it's staying up to date, you're gonna miss stuff. Especially if you're me and you have 225 or 230 processes, whatever I've got now in the system. It's just impossible to keep up with all of it. So, you've got to make sure that you're doing that. So that's very important. Great tip here. Brian dropped in the chat also. He says, you can find holes in processes by viewing the percent of skipped tasks on the dashboard. That is fantastic. I love that tip. That's a great way that you can, and also you can always just keep track to make sure people aren't skipping stuff that you don't want them to skip. So a lot of great benefits there from that. So that's a great tip. Appreciate that. I'm going to kick it over to Julian so he can show people the autopilot here, but I wanted to let people know we've only got about 15 minutes or so left in our call. I want you to start dropping questions into the chat because I want you to get time to ask your questions to either me, Jordan, or Julian. Go ahead and start dropping questions in the chat, and Abby can start looking at those and throwing some up on the screen once we get there. But for now, Julian, why don't you show people how this autopilot can actually work for people?
All right, so I saw a few questions like, what are some of the easiest processes to get started in LeadSimple? Autopilot rules that Todd is mentioning. Delinquencies or your late rent process, we'll build one actually together right now. You just go to your template and you say, all right, on day 2, at exactly, let's be a little nicer and start this at 9 a.m. or 11 or that's 11's fine. Start out under grace period, and I'll tell you what that means in a sec inside of LeadSimple. Just want to make sure that it's active in your property management accounting system software. So delinquent rent is greater than, let's say, $100. And do you want to include anybody? The rent is more than 5 days. That's fine. Do you want to exclude anybody? So do you want to include people? This has to be occupancy is tenant occupied. That's it. And then let's not include anybody who already has a move out process started, and you save this and you turn it on. What this is going to do for you is walk you through a whole sequence here that you're saying, all right, in the grace period, now we start sending out text messages, emails, and it's just going to be a sequence of, hey, now you're past your grace period. Now you're past your late period. It's going to take your delinquent amount and start sending those collections emails and texts. As soon as they pay, they get a thank you for paying email. And that's really doing the whole work for you. And the implication of that is not only, well, my system already sends out those reminders. Well, this is actually coming from someone's personal email. It's coming from a business texting line. It's being sequential. It's knowing exactly if they've paid or not. It's not missing like a beat. Like, for example, you're downloading a ledger, making a phone call, then updating a note, then sending a text message, then updating a note, then something breaks and you get busy. 2 days later, you remember you were doing that. Or so this is very sequential, and that's what autopilot rules can do for you. This is a process you can set up in less than 3 hours. It's an extremely easy process. You're just saying what happens in your grace period, late period, and then if they do pay, they go to this stage. If they don't, you start an evictions process. That's autopilot rules for you in 2 minutes.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, this is one of the biggest benefits of using a software like this. You know, when I talk to people who are on something like, let's say, Monday or Process Street or something like that, because I mean, I was on Process Street for probably, I don't know, 7 years, something like that, before we moved to LeadSimple, you know, 5 or so years ago for our process management. There's no way to do this. You know, there is no autopilot. It was all me creating zaps is what it was. And it was, you know, scheduled reports that go to a parser, that trigger a zap, that create a process. And it's basically something that no one is ever going to do unless they're a techie. And, you know, if you're a nerd like me, you can get all that stuff set up. But, you know, if you got LeadSimple, then you don't need to be a techie nerd. You just do what Julian just showed you how to do in 30 seconds. And that's the benefit of autopilot, is anybody can do it. And in fact, you know, by the way, I mean, he was using a template autopilot there. You know, they've already got the templates in the system for delinquency, lease renewal, move out, you know, different things where it's kind of got the things preset for you. And you just kind of fill in some blanks. Like, does my late rent process start on day 4? Or does it start on day 5? Or, you know, you just have to fill in those real simple things. So I've got this quick question here I want to answer, because I say these things thinking that everybody understands what I'm talking about, but then I remember that, you know, not everybody's as nerdy as I am. A zap is basically a automation. So there's a software out there called Zapier, Zapier, that will do automations for you. So you could basically set up, it's no code, so you don't have to be a software engineer. You can kind of point and click and set up automations. So you can do all that with LeadSimple. LeadSimple connects to it, and you know, it's very easy to set up automations outside of LeadSimple also, but a lot of it's now built in. You know, automated text messages, automated emails. You've got automated process creation with the autopilot, or, you know, you can have one process lead into another. A lot of that stuff's built into LeadSimple nowadays, but in the old days, I had to build all that stuff manually. And yes, I see your message there, Zach. Yes, I can see your skip task. That's my BDM. So we do know when that's happening. Fantastic. So we got some questions here that I wanted to get to. Let me get up through here and find where they started. Leasing question from Liz here. Oh, let me get back to that. Yes, I do have quite a few overdue tasks, Abby. Leasing question. Have you seen any software integration with Tenant Turner and LeadSimple? Have you heard anyone doing this? Maybe some of the more personal follow-up of leasing leads rather than Tenant Turner's auto follow-up. Julian, I'm sure you've seen examples of this. Do you have any case studies or anything you want to mention on this?
Yeah, well, most of visibility is gone after the showing has been completed in most systems. And that's really where we pick it up and just make it a very easy transition into, now let's follow up with this person. What did you think? Let's start getting documentation. Did the co-signer miss a document? Did the tenant get approved? Are we halted at pet screening? Where are we in all of these processes? So that's really the cleanest transition, is, has the showing been completed? And LeadSimple will take it from there very easily. And we can also set up numbers, for example. So imagine a world where your voice over IP system is connected to your Appfolio Buildium account, and somebody's calling, you automatically know it's a prospective tenant, and it routes to the right person, for example. And then, because one thing is to know, I have 70% of my calls go unanswered. That's not telling me much. But if I know that 60% of my owner calls are going unanswered, that's meaningful data, or prospective tenants. And then I'm complaining that I'm not leasing fast enough and that I have too much vacancy. Well, what's your answer rate? So now you don't have to go to different places to see if a call has been made or not, because lots of times we're not even making phone calls. We expect somebody else made that call. So that's really how we help a process that's complicated, such as the leasing process. A lot of moving parts, a lot of different steps to follow.
Nice. And I threw this up. I wanted people to see this, that Jordan had mentioned. Tenant Turner has rolled out a Zapier connection. So, and they've had an open API, by the way, for a while too. If you're technically inclined and can use an API, there's even more functionality there. But you can actually connect all this stuff through Zapier if you have a Zapier account and have a little know-how there to do a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's all of that stuff that Julian was talking about there becomes a lot easier once you just have those things into the system, and it's not just automated follow-up anymore. Now you've also got some other steps you can do for manual reach out. If you've got a leasing agent who's trying, everybody out there knows right now it's very tough to get properties leased. Our average days on market has gone, I believe we were down around 12 days a couple of years ago, and we're now up at 33. And we are, I am radically obsessed with this, as the people on, my employees on the call can tell you. We cover this every Monday morning. I want my days on market less than 21 days. So when we're above 21, I am, on top of that like crazy, because I actually have a 21-day leasing guarantee. So we don't collect a leasing fee if it takes longer than 21 days for us to lease a property. So, we want to make sure we're on top of that. And if you have this stuff built out, where your agents can make sure they're following up on it, makes it a lot easier for you to keep those days on market down and get these properties leased. A few questions here I saw that I wanted to get to. Obviously, the first one I wanted to make sure we covered. Does this connect to AppFolio, Julian?
Yes, we have full API connection. So it's not only like a workaround or anything, it's full API real-time connection, yes.
And by the way, not just AppFolio. That's the case for Buildium, for PropertyWare, which is what we're currently using. We're switching over to RentVine. They've got it for RentVine. Basically got it for any of the major, PM softwares. You can get this direct integration, and it's going to feed in all of your data. So your tenant leads, your owners, your current tenants, vendors, all that kind of stuff can feed into the system. You can automatically trigger application screening processes, all that kind of stuff. So very, very good stuff there. Let me see here. And then we had a question. Here we go. Does LeadSimple have these templates already built in if we jump on board with them? So how much do you actually have, Julian, that's available there in your template library for people when they get onboarded?
Oh man, you got over a dozen templated processes. It's good stuff. It's 12 years worth of best practices. We continually revise them. So you have to make them custom to your way of working for a certain regulation or anything that you need. However, your onboarding fee includes that training for you and your team. So we're going to hold your hand and make sure that you know how to use the system. And at the end of the day, it's just going to be a really simple checklist for your team to follow and not have to guess what they have to do today. Just follow the checklist. Nobody likes to be told what to do. But it does give you a lot of satisfaction to check things off and know where you're at.
Yeah, and I'll also add to that. I mean, there's a number of consultants in the industry that will also help you with this too. Obviously LeadSimple is going to help you with your onboarding. My schedule's pretty booked at this point, but there's other consultants out there like Ben Servin over at Black Sheep. You've got PM Path Builders who help with this. There's plenty of options out there to assist you if you need help beyond the onboarding help that LeadSimple does, which is a lot in and of itself to help you get started. But if you really want to dive into this and really customize and really automate and everything, those resources are out there nowadays. When we first started up PM Assist a couple years ago, there was very few people who were doing this. You kind of had to figure it out. But now the market, there's lots of assistance out there. So, you're not, if you're worried that you're going to kind of be left on your own and not be able to get this off the ground, that's not the case. The only times I really see it where people don't really implement to the extent they should is because they're not putting in the effort to do it. They're just not devoting the time. They're not devoting the resources. If you want to, you can get this stuff done really easily and really quickly. So don't worry that you're not going to have the help you need. And yes, I do have 14 overdue tasks. I am well aware, Abby. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I actually have more than that because I have 2 accounts in LeadSimple, so I actually have like 90 on the other one. So thank you for reminding everybody. And let me see here. And then, of course, Abby mentioned, of course, full webinar is going to be available on our Substack by the end of next week. We are coming to the end here. We're about to run out of time. So wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. If you're not on our Substack, pmassist.substack.com. That way, any webinar you miss, we always send those out after the fact. So you'll be able to see these recordings. And a lot of times we have some additional information that we throw in on there also. If you are a PM Assist Insider subscriber, we actually provide you LeadSimple templates also. So, you'll get a lot of these templates and everything that we give to our paid subscribers for things like some of the more, I would say, in-depth tasks. So obviously LeadSimple is providing you all these templates for kind of your basic, what I consider the core functions of your PM company, your rent ready, your leasing, your move in, your move out, those sorts of things. They're providing all that. We've also got tons of templates for more esoteric things, like if you've got people who want to do a lease amendment, or they've got an unapproved pet, or, all those kinds of things that come up. We got templates for all that stuff that our subscribers get. So always keep that in mind also. So huge thanks to Jordan. Huge thanks to Julian for kind of showing us all this kind of stuff. I am a true believer in LeadSimple. This is not a sales presentation. This is a webinar. We just wanted to get people to see, but I will always endorse this product and tell people you need it. I've been on LeadSimple since it was just a CRM, probably back in, I don't know, Jordan, when, like 2014 or something like that? Is that probably around the right time frame?
Yeah, I just remember your email domain was like GTL.
No, back then it was actually centralgeorgiarealty.com.
Yes,
that's
what it was. Yes, a long time ago.
Long time ago. I'm a true believer. I love this product. I'm huge fans of both Jordan and Julian. So reach out to them if they want to reach out to you guys. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you, do a demo, and get all the information?
Julian?
For me, it's just Julian at LeadSimple, and I can drop a link for a demo here, just if somebody wants to save that quickly.
Excellent. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Perfect. There's Julian's. Everybody look in the chat. That's Julian's calendar link right there for Calendly. You can set up a demo with him. And also, Abby just posted Jordan's Profitable Property Management podcast. I just recorded a new one with Jordan last week while I was out in Austin. Had a great time doing that. If you don't listen to this podcast, you really need to, because I will say Jordan is the best podcast interviewer there is. Not only does Jordan you will never hear Jordan say or those sorts of things. Well, for some reason Jordan's mind just works where he just keeps everything flowing, and it just seems so organic. It is always a pleasure to record a podcast, but it's great to listen to. So definitely check that out. I don't know when the new podcast that I've recorded will be out, but that should be coming in the future. And he's got a bunch of he recorded with. How many people did you record with, Jordan? Like 8 people or something last week?
I think like 12.
12. So lots of new content, great information. So really appreciate everybody joining us today. Thank you to Jordan. Thank you for Julian. Any closing comments from either of you before we wrap it up today?
None for me. Love being here. Love being a part of this community. Appreciate the support and just the vision that you've had from early days around process. It's made a dent in our industry.
Thank you. Julian, any closing comments?
No, just the feeling is mutual. Really admire the work you guys are doing, and love following you with everything you do, and happy to be here.
Of course, my wife is always there with the jokes. I've got vision for process, but still can't hear her. That's wonderful. Thank you, Abby. Thank you for providing the humor here. Thank you for everybody for showing up. We will see you guys next month for our next webinar. And of course, we'll see everybody at Property Meld Summit or at the NARPM National Convention. So everybody have a great extended weekend, and we will see you later.
Bye.